You see,
talk about that for a while.
They talk about these Renaissance periods, and they talk about all this great learning and stuff that happened with the Renaissance stuff, from music to art to philosophical points of view. It would be the mindset of the European coming from out of the Middle Ages. They talk about the Renaissance period. And all the Renaissance period is the Pope and the Italians taking advantage of the learning that was given to the Europeans for the last 800 years by the Moors. So in so many words, here's another period where they basically take all these ancient doctrines of the Moors or the ancient black man and steal it and say it's theirs. So anytime you hear these great they had one in Toledo. You see, anytime you have these great things, these great periods, this is nothing but just acquiescing the Moors. The Moors information, like take for instance, you would have different things that would happen that would come about, like let me keep trying to give you some examples of your secret societies. What they would do, the secret society was basically started by the Moors. Let me explain. The Knights Templars, York Rite, Scottish Rite, and all this. So let me explain how this came about. Because a lot of the doctrines after the Moors went to the secret societies too, and then they could sift out the greater knowledge and then give you the several liberal arts and stuff like that. But there's higher degrees of learning that's now become the company of the lodge. Now let me explain how this lodge thing came about. The Moors came in. They created the 16 universities. That's what we can count. We don't know. Okay, let's say if you went to the university and then you got your regular learning, but then you would initiate into a fraternity. Well, the same thing happened in the Moor science was this. You would come in and they would give you the general learning, and then you would initiate into a higher degree of learning, which now would be the fraternities, which is a ceremonial thing, but at that particular time it was the Masonic orders. So your Masonic order would be equivalent to a fraternity in modern day. So when you went to these universities and stuff, and you got to a certain level, and you learned the general several liberal arts and stuff, and the general several stuff that you learned, which now is all the universities teach. After that, you would go into a Masonic order that was a part of the universities, or a secret society that is a part of the universities. You see what I'm saying? To learn higher degrees of knowledge. We see remnants of that now when you got the Skull and Bones at Yale. So the Skull and Bones at Yale, although you got the people from Yale, but you got a secret society, that all came from the Moors. So what would be the secret societies inside of the university? York Rite, Scottish Rite, all these different ones. And then later on, groups like the Rosicrucians that would come up. And what they did is that they took all this Moorish doctrines. And so a lot of the higher degree stuff became a ward of the Masonic orders. You see what I'm saying? But all this stuff is nothing but stuff that they learned from the Moors. You see, when they learn from the Moors. And everything is a series of acquiescing somebody else's paradigms. So the Moors saw a vision. The Moors saw a vision of a country and a place by the setting sun that was not even a civilization yet. It hadn't even come into fruition. And the Moors set out to bring that city on a shining hill that Ronald Reagan talks about. In the West, they start America. That's why you so many presidents before George Washington's were all black. Those were Moors. So this whole system over here was set up, you see what I'm saying? By the Moors. And for some reason, because of the Moors conquering Europe, and the Moors being the origin of Americas, for some reason, the people who benefited from that deemed the Moor, which means blackface one, or the black Moor, or it also means, because anytime you hear the word Sufi, that's another word for the Moors. The word Sufi means woolly-haired one. So instead of saying, they'll separate Sufi from the Moor. The Moor was a woolly-haired one. You see, and some reason I don't know if it was after Spain. C. Primadel calls it Manichaeism, racism, with Queen Isabella and those particular ones. They deemed the Moor the enemy.
Who?
The European secret societies that were started by the Moors.
Okay.
You see, it was started by the Moors. For some reason, it's almost as if to say, because you are our teacher, you have to be our enemy.
Is this why I know an initiation?
They come in,
Talk about
like Dr. Ben said, when the white Masons or the white secret societies, what they do is whenever their initiates or their neophytes cross over into the initiated, the first thing they do is bring a black man in from wherever, blindfolded, and say, "This is your father. Always hold him down."
Why?
They know that civilization originated with us. They know that they are the latter part of that. For some reason, they feel that the only way they can rule is to keep the initiators of civilization down. It's some sick, demented way of thinking. It's a fear, xenophobia. This particular fear, we got to coin a new term for it. It's not the fear of xenophobia is the fear of a person that's unlike you, different cultures or what have you. We got to coin a new phrase that has to be into the lexicon, and that is a word that will say, you fear a person that you deem is greater than you.
That is correct.
And that's the difference here.
Yeah.
They fear us, and they say that we are the enemies not because we are different. We are the enemies because we are the initiators of civilization, and we gave them all that they have. You see, if you build a TV, you build an airplane, you build anything, the blueprints on what you might later day come to build these things, you got the technology from earlier people. Now you might expound upon it to the point where it's useful to the time you're living in, but nevertheless, you were not the authors of the blueprint. You were not the master builder. We are the master builders. So you have a fear of our greatness.
Yes.
And because you fear our greatness, you say, we always have to be an enemy because they figure our rise is their fall.
Correct.
You see. So we don't rise. And what they don't realize, here goes again. They are thinking that we're going to do to them like they do to us. Because they think that humans think like them. No. You see what I'm saying? Your mother and your father, just like our mothers and fathers, would not treat us the same way as a child would treat somebody. You see. And basically, they're incapable of love. Now, I'm not talking about a sensation, because that word is thrown around a lot. You see, I'm not talking about the way somebody make you feel, and you basically react based on this person giving you a chemical reaction and make you feel a certain way. No, we're talking about reacting based on the way you feel about somebody. It's different. See, if you only reply to me based on the way I make you feel, you see what I'm saying? That's selfish. And it's selfish because you don't know how to feel about somebody, even in the fact that they never made you feel a certain way. You understand what I'm saying? You know, so it's the same, so it's this thing, it's this fear that they feel that the society that they're going to be in has to be based on keeping the architects down. Number one, you got to keep them down because you stole every damn thing from them. Just for that to come out, you see what I'm saying, would make you feel inferior. Now, we're thinking like them. We wouldn't think that you're inferior if you inherited a civilization that we put together, but you think that you're inferior. You see what I'm saying? If you told the people, no, they're the architects of this thing. So it's some psychological sick and twisted stuff. You see what I'm saying? But nevertheless, what we have a problem with is understanding people's thoughts, people's mentalities, people's temperament. You see what I'm saying? And we as black people get caught up in that because we think that they think like us. Yeah. You see. But all this had to be, all this stuff had to be in a particular aspect because, let me give you said, well, why did this have to be this way? Well, look, let's just take the Moors. Because some people say, well, we might have had another history if the Moors didn't go into Spain and go into Europe and educate them. Well, let's look at it this way. If we knew we were going into a state of dormancy, going to sleep, civilization was going to go out of our hands, based on just age, based on, like Dr. Ben said, time just ran out. Seasons. If we knew this, would you rather, and you knew a younger, savage people going to take over, wouldn't you try to want to educate them? So whenever you start to wake up out of your dormancy, you would have some sense of education and some sense of civilization. It's not the perfect. It's only a shadow of what we did. But can you imagine what would happen if you didn't educate him at all? Oh, yeah. And you came out of your dormancy and he's taking over the world. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. In barbarism. Mm-hmm. So we knew if we didn't educate them, you see, then when we did start to wake up, we wouldn't even have a pseudo-education. We wouldn't have anything. If we just get back a part of what we gave them, there's things in us that we can preserve. You see what I'm saying? And be at a better position. Yep. We can look at the white man and say he came from the caves and preserved some stuff from us and started ruling. We gotta have something so we were advanced enough to see the future, know that we had to do certain things. You see. Because if we didn't give these children this, when we did wake up from out of our dormancy, we wouldn't have nothing. Look how bad it is when we woke up.
Yes.
Can you imagine if he didn't get shit? Nothing. You see. So, our pyramids, from the pyramids or from the pharaohs to Negroes, you understand?
Yeah.
In so many words, it's not necessarily a tragedy as it is a process. Now, going back to the timeline, if you rule for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, for thousands of years, what transpired in the last 2,000 years is a recess. Because you got to understand something now. They said that the European would only rule for a short period of time. You see, we look at civilizations, America is falling off the hinges right at a little over 200 years. You see, so we understand that, you know, this stuff it doesn't last forever. It's going to spin itself out. You see, so it's going to spin itself out. But then again, on the other hand, it's a recess compared to how long we rule.
Yes.
You see, on that particular level, you see, and you know, and not unless somebody wipes you out on a genocide level like the Tasmanians or the Aborigines, you still endure. Now it might be at a certain level, but nevertheless, nothing is ever really destroyed. You see?
Sure.
We gave him a version of pharaonic society. To this day, we can look at certain things and say that came out of Egypt. You see? That came out of Egypt. So we look at things like that. So here goes again. From the pyramids to the projects,
From pyramid to Negro.
is a process more than it is and a recess, more than it is a failure. You see, we got texts. Even the Bible says the Son of Man will rise in the west.
Yes.
The Book of the Dead, one of the names for Osiris is Osiris Winterfell. And Osiris Winterfell means the Great Westerner. Amenta, the land of Amen, is in the west. The sun sets in the west. You see. So all this is a process for us to be in the west. Now, we go into one other part about this thing, how this transpires to us. Now, on the genetic level. They say, out of Egypt I will call my son. Or out of Africa I will call my son. You had these Africans, some people call them tribes, some people call them nations, but they were scattered. They had broken apart, and they were nations. So in order to make it a covenant, make it whole again, you got to extrapolate an African body out to another land. And then you have to come in and extrapolate several different African tribes or African cultures out. And then you have to genetically mix them back together to make the whole African. You see, let me give you an example. So they say that, they talked about it two ways. They say that they used to take these large bodies of Africans and put them in in the Caribbean. And then those Africans threw off the oppressors called the Maroon Societies, and they had these revolts. So they decided, look, we're going to take them to America and break them into small lots. But it won't be one nation that can take over. It'll be different African tribes from all over Africa. And we'll